I still remember sitting alone in my wedding dress, phone in hand, waiting for a call that never came. My parents weren't stuck in traffic. They weren't in the hospital. They made a choice, and that choice was not me. I cried through my vows that day. I smiled for the photos. And I buried that pain so deep I convinced myself it didn't matter. I told myself, you don't need them. You never did, and I believed it. For a while. Then, 7 years later, my bank account hit 7 figures. And suddenly, I had 2 brand new parents. Parents who remembered my birthday. Parents who called just to check in. Parents who cried and said they were so proud of me. I almost let them back in. Almost. But here's the thing about people who hurt you for money. They always show you exactly who they are when the money arrives. You need to understand who I was before any of this happened. I was the good daughter. The one who called every Sunday. The one who drove 3 hours to help my mom move furniture. The one who sent money when my dad said rent was tight, even when my own bank account was scraping zero. I grew up in a house where love felt conditional, where I'm proud of you came with a but I thought that was just how families worked. I thought if I tried hard enough, if I was good enough, helpful enough, present enough, they would finally just love me. Freely. Without conditions. I was in my mid-20s when I met Daniel. He was steady and kind, in a way I had never experienced before. And for the first time in my life, someone chose me without needing anything in return. That feeling was completely foreign to me. And that should have told me everything about my parents. My parents met Daniel exactly once before the engagement. Once. And even that meeting felt like a performance. My mother smiled at him the whole evening. My father shook his hand too firmly and laughed too loudly. But on the drive home, alone with me, the smiles dropped. My mother said he seemed fine. My father said he didn't understand what Daniel did for work. He was a software engineer. That was hard to misunderstand. But what they really meant, what they kept dancing around, was that Daniel didn't come from money. His parents were working people. Good people. Honest people. But not the kind of people my parents wanted attached to their family name. Which was ironic. Because we weren't wealthy either. We were just pretending. My parents cared more about appearances than almost anything else. And Daniel, quiet, genuine, unpretentious Daniel, made them uncomfortable. I should have seen where this was going. But I was too busy trying to make everyone happy to see the wall coming. The warning signs came early. I just refused to read them. When Daniel proposed, I called my parents before anyone else. My mother's first response was, "Oh. Already, not congratulations, not I'm so happy for you, just already." My father asked if we talked about a prenuptial agreement. On the day of my engagement. I brushed it off. I told myself they were just surprised. Then came the dress shopping. My mother came, I'll give her that. But she spent the entire appointment on her phone. When I came out in the dress I eventually chose, the one that made me feel like myself, she looked up and said, "It's very simple, isn't it?" I bought it anyway. Then the venue. Daniel and I chose a small outdoor wedding. Intimate. Meaningful. My parents called it underwhelming. My father suggested we scale up. Get a proper hall. Invite more of their friends. Their friends. I started to feel like this wedding wasn't mine at all. But I still never imagined what they would actually do. 2 months before the wedding, my parents sat me down. They said they were concerned. Concerned about Daniel's career stability. Concerned about what kind of life he could provide. They used the word provide like it was Daniel's job to satisfy them, not to love their daughter. My father slid a piece of paper across the table. He had written down the names of 3 men. 3 men from our extended community who were, in his words, better suited. I stared at that piece of paper for a long time. Then I folded it in half and put it in my bag. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, I'm marrying Daniel. My mother said, and I will never forget this, then don't expect us to celebrate something we don't support. I told Daniel that night. He held my hands and asked if I wanted to postpone. He was willing to wait for me. For my peace. I said no. I said my parents would come around. They always did. Right up until the day they didn't. The morning of my wedding, I woke up at 6. I made coffee. I sat with it for 20 minutes just breathing. My bridesmaids arrived. Music played. Someone did my hair. And the whole time, I kept checking my phone. At 9, I texted my mother, "We're getting ready. I love you," no reply. At 10:30, still nothing. At 11:15, 45 minutes before the ceremony, my aunt called me. Not my parents. My aunt. She told me quietly that my parents were not coming. That they had decided the night before. That they were at home. Home. I sat down on the edge of the bed in my wedding dress. The room was still full of people, music, laughter. And I was completely alone inside it. My maid of honor saw my face and cleared the room. Then I cried. Hard. For exactly 11 minutes. Then I washed my face. I fixed my mascara. I walked down that aisle. And not once, did I let them steal that day from me. But the damage was already done. I didn't call them that day. Or the next. Or for 2 weeks. When I finally did, I kept my voice steady. My mother answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. She said she was sorry I was upset. Not sorry for what she did. Sorry that I was upset about it. There's a difference. I asked her directly, "Did you choose not to come to my wedding?" She said, "We couldn't support something we didn't believe in." I asked my father the same question. He said, "You made your choice. We made ours, that was it." No apology. No grief. No acknowledgement that they had missed the single most important day of my adult life. My mother then said, almost as an afterthought, that she hoped Daniel and I would be comfortable. Comfortable. Like she was wishing us adequate heating. I told them both, very calmly, that I needed time. What I actually meant was, I am done performing love for people who treat it like a transaction. I hung up. And I kept that promise to myself for a very long time. The year after the wedding was the hardest of my life. Not because of what they did, but because of what it unlocked inside me. Every childhood memory I'd pushed down came back up. Every time I'd been dismissed. Every time affection was withheld as punishment. Every time I felt like I had to earn my place in my own family. I started therapy. Twice a week at first, then once. My therapist asked me something in one of our early sessions that stopped me cold. She said, "When did you first learn that love had conditions?" I couldn't answer her. Because the answer was, always. I had always known. I had just never let myself say it out loud. Daniel was patient. Incredibly patient. But I watched myself pulling away from him too, not because of anything he did. Because I had been trained to distrust warmth. I was grieving parents who were still alive. And that is a specific kind of pain that doesn't have a name. It just sits in your chest. Quietly. Every single day. About 18 months after the wedding, something shifted. I was sitting with my therapist, and she asked me what I wanted my life to look like in 5 years. And for the first time, I answered without thinking about my parents at all. I didn't factor in their approval, their opinions, their comfort. I just answered for me. I said I wanted to build something. I had been working in marketing for several years, contract work, freelance, piecemeal. I was good at it. People kept telling me I was good at it, but I had never fully committed because some part of me was still waiting for permission, waiting for someone to validate the choice. That day, I decided I was done waiting. I registered my business that week. A boutique digital marketing consultancy. Small. Just me and a part-time assistant. No investors. No safety net. Just the knowledge that I had been the reliable one my entire life. And it was finally time to be reliable for myself. The first year of the business was brutal. I won't romanticize it. I worked 12-hour days. I lost 2 clients in the same month and had to wire my own savings back into the company, $4,000. Just to cover contractor invoices. Daniel made dinner every night that year. Every single night. Because by 7 o'clock, I was too exhausted to think about food. But something was working. I could feel it. By month 14, I had a roster of 6 consistent clients. By month 20, I hired my first full-time employee. By the end of year 3, we were generating just over $400,000 in annual revenue. I was not rich. Not yet. But I was building something real. Something mine. And not once during those 3 years did my parents cross my mind professionally. I had completely separated who I was at work from the wound they had left behind. Then, one Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer it. It was my aunt, the same one who had called me on my wedding morning. She told me my parents had been asking about me, that they'd seen something, a feature in an industry newsletter, a LinkedIn post someone had shared in the family group chat. My company had just closed a contract worth $1.2 million. It was the biggest deal I had ever made. And somehow, it had reached them. 3 days later, my mother called. Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. She said she missed me, that she thought about me all the time, that she wanted us to start fresh. My father called the following day. He said he'd been proud of me for a while now, like he'd been sitting on it. Like pride was something you parceled out in careful doses. They wanted to visit. They wanted to meet for dinner. They had suggestions about my company. Maybe they could help, maybe they knew people, maybe we could talk about the future. And I sat with those messages for 3 full days. Then I wrote them each a letter. Not an email. A letter. And in that letter, I said everything I had never said out loud. I told them I remembered every moment they had dismissed, every conditional hug, every fine that was meant to wound. And I told them clearly I forgave them, but I would not be resuming a relationship built on who I had become instead of who I had always been. I wished them well. I meant it. And I sealed both envelopes. And felt the lightest I had felt in years. Today, my company employs 11 people. Daniel and I just celebrated 7 years of marriage. Real celebration, just us, just the people who showed up. My therapist and I worked together for 4 years. She helped me understand that I spent most of my childhood trying to be lovable enough to be loved, and that the cruelest thing conditional love does is make you believe the condition is you. It wasn't me. It was never me. My parents responded to my letters. Both of them. Brief. Polite. Sad. I read them once and put them away. I haven't called since. That might change someday. It might not. But what I know for certain is this: I am not waiting anymore. Not for permission. Not for validation. Not for love that only shows up when there's something in it for the giver. I built my life from the inside out. And the people who are in it now, they were there before the money, before the press, before any of it. Those are my people. That is my family. Any part of this story felt familiar. If you've ever had to grieve someone who is still alive, drop a word in the comments. Just one word. Whatever you're carrying. You don't have to explain it. We'll understand. And if this story meant something to you, please subscribe. There are more stories like this one on Dossier Karma. Stories about betrayal, about survival, and about what it looks like when the truth finally catches up. I'll see you in the next one.